this National Day of Prayer, and we ask that you would bless our nation and our state and our community, and bless those leaders that are working on our behalf. I ask that you give them wisdom and judgment to do the right thing for the citizens. We ask that you would bless the leadership of this utility, the board and the management team. Help us to have wisdom and knowledge to make the right decisions for our customers and our community. We ask, as always, that you be with our employees, watch over them, keep them safe in everything they do. We ask that you would bless this food to nourish our bodies, and bless us to do your will. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chairman?
I'd like to call the hearing to order. Is everyone present? Then I'll ask the legal counsel to explain the nature of the scope of the proceedings.
Okay. Ms. Embry, if you want to sit back here, the commission would be able to see you better.
Sure.
This is a hearing on an employee disagreement. She has filed a complaint with the chairman. Each of you have received a copy of her complaint and the response both to her complaint and to the disagreements that she filed. The hearing is going to be limited to the issues that she raised in her complaint. And as far as KRS 90.380, that is not a matter that you can consider. That's not something that's in your purview, so that we will not be addressing that. The chairman has discretion to control the meeting, and I guess we're ready to begin, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Emery, as counsel said, the commission has received a written copy of your disagreement and complaint, and we've all read those. Now I would like to ask if any of the commissioners have any questions of Ms. Emery. No questions? Ms. Emery, would you like to have any additional comments that you'd like to say to the commission?
Well, I would just like to state, I know there was a lot of correspondence back and forth in this whole procedure, and some of it is kind of misleading. Basically, I am being terminated, but my job duties are not. They are going to someone else at a higher pay rate in a position that was just newly created. And I think probably when that was created, maybe you all were not aware of the full, that was actually affecting someone else being eliminated to make that position, because my job duties are not going away. They will still be here. There's very little of my job duties that will go away when the plant closes. So I actually helped create the new job description to make sure that my job duties were in with the other job. So, you know, at the end of the day, I'm being terminated, but my job duties are not. Someone will still be here doing my job duties. So I'm just asking that you reconsider the facts, that that is actually what's going on, that you're losing an employee that has never been in any trouble for anything, always on time, excellent job reviews, so, and giving those duties to someone else. So I'm just asking you to reconsider the facts.
Thank you. Your manager, would you have any comments, or anyone on your staff have any comments?
I don't think we have anything additionally to add to what we provided in writing to you. You know, the decision has been made, although we haven't brought that to you for final action as we continue toward the closure of Elmer Smith Station to adjust our jobs moving forward. But we do plan to eliminate one of the two AP specialists. The AP specialist job function is not going away, but the volume of the work that needs to be done will go away. And as we talked about when we created the financial specialist, most of those job duties are some of the job duties that were from the senior treasury analyst position as we reconfigure the Treasury Department, as we are looking to reconfigure the Finance and Accounting Department moving forward post production. So I think that's where we stand with that.
Hearing those statements, do any commissioners have a comment?
I just wanted to ask a question. Reading through the documentation that you provide us in the timeline, I'm just curious that, You had said earlier on, several times within this documentation that you felt like the job was unjustified and should not have been created if you were doing our job duties. But I noticed that in the timeline you presented, that when you were working with Lynn and Jason to create the job description, did you ever voice your concern about that job not being needed at that time?
No, because I was actually led to believe that I would be the one performing the job.
So you really didn't raise that question until you found out you weren't qualified to get the job?
Well, I didn't realize I would be eliminated. I was never led to believe I would be eliminated because we would combine my job duties with someone else and I would continue to do them.
Well,
I mean, I wasn't really in a position, the whole time my thing was if I can just keep a job, I'll do whatever jobs you need me to do.
so that leaves me the appearance anyway, that the real issue is not the creation of the job, the real issue is that you didn't get the job.
Well, it's the fact that I'm being terminated, but my duties are not going away.
Thank you.
And just clarification, she's not being terminated at this time.
Speculation.
Yeah. That's a decision that would be made in the future.
It's just been told to me that that is what's to come, so.
It seems when I look at that, that there was a civil service requirement that there be a test taken for this new position,
For the new position, yes.
and that you took the test, but weren't in the top
Right, I was the fourth score.
score or something like that. And-
Right.
Are we required to look at the best and best score, the top scores or something?
They provide us
position?
the top band, and
There's a rule of three.
the rule, you're
Rule
right,
3?
and we are required to hire from that band unless those candidates are not qualified. And there were 3 qualified candidates within that band.
And one of those 3 people has been interviewed and is accepting the job, is that?
Yes.
That's correct, that's what I'm understanding as well.
Yes.
But and that's just a civil service requirement, that
Yes, we follow the
there's
civil
no way we
service.
can go around it, is that correct, is what I'm understanding?
Any other questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
I'd make a motion that we dismiss the complaint for lack of cause. I don't really see that. What the complaint is asking, you simply ask that we continue with your job performance and your duties as things, well, that your job is still going, so I don't understand the nature of what you're asking us.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Have any further discussion? Call for the vote on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Tim, will you receive a written notice from those concerned with this decision?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is time to review our budget. Before Laura takes it away, I just want to say that a lot of folks work very hard on the budget. A lot of those folks are here today to help present. And do appreciate all the hard work that was done. This is a little bit different budget for us. It's the first budget that we've done that includes the beginning of the process of shutting down Owensboro Station. And so Unit 1 shutdown is included in this budget, and the implications that has all the way through the organization, including our power marketing numbers. So the numbers you'll see that Laura presents that are significantly different from previous years. Most of that difference is due to the plan we've got in place, and the budget will even be more different this time next year. So, and Laura's going to go through that. Laura's done a great job pulling all this together, and she does a great job presenting it. So with that.
Now the pressure's on, Kevin.
Pressure's on. Pressure's on.
As Kevin mentioned, I'm here to present to you. You guys did receive, or it was posted, the detailed schedules of our budget, and we put together a presentation of the high-level points that we'd like to point out in our budget. I'll start with the consolidated electric system, and as a reminder, that is our retail system, wholesale power marketing, telecommunication, and our Elmer Smith generating station. As far as what's included in our budget assumptions, we have 1.6 million megawatt hours of generation. That is, as Kevin noted, quite a bit different from our 2.1 million megawatt hour generation budget from last year. That is based on the forward price curve date of 2/22/19. Our average wholesale prices included in the budget is $34 per megawatt hour. Now, we have assumed the approved base rate increase average of 4%. We know that by customer class, those rate changes are different, but on average, there's a 4% increase, and that is effective June the 1st, 2019. We've also assumed a couple of bond defeasance, one in this fiscal year in May of $3.2 million, and then in fiscal year 2020 in October of $13 million. That number is quite a bit different from the original number. I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 million, and that is due to some interest rate savings we anticipate to be able to take advantage of. Our ECCA revenue is pretty much flat. It did increase slightly, $349,000, and that's primarily due to our volume increase. However, our ECA revenue, the accrued revenue decreased by $13 million, and that's primarily due to lower fuel costs, lower backup capacity costs, as well as some transmission costs as well. It does include our rate decreases there that is effective June the 1st as well. As far as our contingency assumptions, we have $50,000 of delivery expense for storms and about $408,000 of an unplanned maintenance at Elmer Smith. Our wholesale revenues are not fully hedged, and our coal supply is entirely contracted. As usual, our winter and summer prices are still key to our wholesale performance, as well as our retail sales are very weather contingent. I'll start with our net income for the consolidated electric system. It's down 29% at $8.5 million compared to our $12.1 million budget for last year. If you take that $8.5 million, you add back depreciation and interest, you have your net operating revenue, and that's what's available to meet our obligations as far as debt service. That's down 17% at $32 million compared to our $38.7 million from last year. So taking note of the $32 million, the next slide shows our revenue requirements that will need to be satisfied with the $32 million. First being the debt service funding of $22.4 million. We do need to reduce that by the city transfer of $9.7 million. The cash dividend of $7.3 million represents a 2.5% increase over last year's budget. And then we have our payment in lieu of taxes of $2.4 million or free services. We also would need to fund the routine capital of $6.9 million. But we do have a recovery of our ECA balance assumed in the budget of $4.6 million. And we have some funding from our interfund transfers of just over $500,000, and then some available interest income of $1.2 million that we can add back. That does leave us a negative net cash flow of $681,000. Our megawatt hour sales are down, and that's primarily, as Kevin has noted, is primarily down to being to our single unit dependency. We're down 19, almost 20%, and as you would, let me go back. As you see that our sales for retail is pretty flat to last year's budget, but it does make up a bigger portion of our available generation. Our operating revenue for a consolidated electric system is down nearly 18% at $131 million compared to our $160 million budget last year. And then our operating expenses are down 18%, and as I noted before, retail will get a larger portion of that operating expense since a larger portion of our generation, our available generation, is going to satisfy our retail load. Again, it's down 18%, 99 million compared to the $121 million budget from last year. Our next slide shows, is a pie chart of our operating expenses. Shows that production cost is pretty much 75% of our cost, our operating cost. Fuel being $47 million, purchase power at $11.3 million, and then other production costs at $16.1 million. The next slide shows a comparison of our operating expense compared to our 19 budget. Again, it's down 22 million, almost a little over 18%. The primary drivers there are fuel for generation and production, but it does include an increased purchase power that we anticipate to meet our retail load that we'll need to.
Do you want us to hold questions or after you go?
No, you can stop me anytime.
Well, I'm curious of that increase in customer service, that number.
Credit cards, it was in this account now, and it wasn't budgeted for the years before, so it's a $300-some-odd-thousand addition or delta in the credit card charges that we pay. That's the biggest difference. It's more than $284,000. So we're actually down without those. Is that the correct account?
Correct.
That's a good question. What was it before?
Wasn't budgeted. So we found that out when Jason Alden left. We took over credit card processing downstairs.
Well, just because it wasn't budgeted, don't mean it's charged somewhere.
That's true.
It was charged on an actual basis, but they were not. They were missing it in the budget.
So the credit card's gonna be how much?
It's $400-some-odd-thousand.
It's nearly 500,000,
Yep.
yes. Are there any questions before I move on? This slide shows our total operating cost per megawatt hour for our Elmer Smith generating station. We feel like this is a better indicator of performance since much of that cost is variable based on generated volumes. It's pretty much, it shows the first line represents our non-fuel costs, and that's a lot of our maintenance costs, that it is not variable. And then we're budgeting, we are budgeting lower expense there, but we're budgeting over fewer megawatt hours, so there's an increase there. The red line represents our fuel costs, and it is pretty much on target with this year's budget. This year's projections do include the coal inventory adjustments, and that's what drives that number down for the projection for this year. And then the last line, the green line, represents our total costs, and it is $53 next year, and that's basically some of those, the product of some of those fixed costs over fewer megawatt hours. The next slide shows our cash and investment balances. We end up at the year at just over $108 million compared to our $117 million budget last year. As I mentioned earlier, it does include bond defeasance in May and in October of 2020. That's it for the consolidated electric system. We do have a few slides on our telecommunications budget that we pulled out that we wanted to show as well. Our operating revenue, we are proposing a budget at $2.2 million, which is nearly 20% above last year's budget, and that increase is primarily driven by increases in our residential or fiber to the home. Our operating expenses are up 10% over last year's budget at $1.8 million. That's primarily in our O&M costs, and that's given our growth efforts for that business unit. The next slide shows our net income before city transfer, and pretty similar to last year, we're budgeting a break-even point, noting that our projections for this year is going to be above our budgeted figure. The next slide shows a long-term projection for telecommunications. It notes the green line represents our revenue that we anticipate. And just to back up a bit, 17 and 18 here is actuals, and then we included a projection from 19 to year 2039. So again, the green line represents our revenue. The red part of the bars there represents our total expenses that we are projecting or have achieved. And then the blue section of the bar represents our net income. Do want to note the dots at the beginning of the graph here represents our projections that was included in our original business plan in 17. And wanted to note that we did come in above those projections for those periods as well. One other note, our telecommunication budget does assume transfers from the RNC fund in lieu of bonding for the next phase of the fiber to the home build out in the tune of 1.9 million. Of course, we'll be coming back and seeking approval as the need arises for that. That's it for consolidated electric system, and I'll move on to water if there are no questions. Excuse me. As far as our assumptions, our budget assumptions is we have 595 million cubic feet, or just under 4,500 million gallon production. Our retail revenues do include the second phase of the rate increase that was approved in 2018. And then our wholesale, our district's revenues assumes increased recovery for the cost of debt on the cabin expansion. We have about $18,000 of unplanned maintenance for production as well included in this budget. Our net income, we're proposing a budget of $1.4 million, which is above our $523,000 budget for this current fiscal year. And that is due to our anticipated increased cost of debt. If you add back depreciation and interest, you get the net operating revenue, or the revenues available to satisfy our debt service. It's $6.6 million, up nearly 19% over our $5.6 million budget last year. Taking note of the $6.6 million, the next slide shows our revenue requirements. The debt service fee of $4.6 million. We also have city transfers of just under $350,000 in the form of payment in lieu of taxes. We would need to satisfy our routine capital of $1.8 million, but we can add back some routine transfers of just over $100,000, and there's some interest income, almost $100,000 there. We do have a positive net cash flow there, proposed of $141,000. This slide shows our sales in both cubic feet and gallons. While our sales are pretty flat, historically, we have included a slight increase of about 1% for water sales. Our operating revenue for the water system, we budgeted an 8% increase, and that's primarily due to the increase in volume as well as the rate increases that we've included. Coming in at $14.8 million compared to our $13.7 million budget from last year. Our operating expenses are pretty flat to last year's budget, being on slightly up, not nearly not as up, just below 1%. But it's just due to our efforts to try to maintain our costs there. This next slide, similar to electric, shows that our production is a major part of our operating expense, coming in at $1.2 million, then followed by delivery expense of $1.5 million, and G&A at 1.6. This slide shows a comparison of our proposed operating expenses for 2020 compared to our 19 budget. Again, just shows it's pretty flat, and the primary drivers being production and transmission. Our cash and investment balances are shown here, coming in at $16.8 million compared to our $43.7 million budget. And again, the news there is we're actually spending down the capital funds for the cabin expansion, as anticipated. That's it for both electric and water. We did pull together some slides on total company with respect to labor and G&A expenses. And then I'll want to point out some of the key assumptions that are included there. We have community investments of $172,000 included. About $10,000 of that is Go EDC. The remaining $162,000 is primarily United Way and Salvation Army. Our employee wage increase of 3% with salaries and benefits is around $759,000. We have included a pension rate increase of 12%. We went from just over 21, almost 21.5% to just over 24%, and that was $426,000. This slide shows a comparison of our total G&A, that's both for electric and water, that we're proposing in the 2020 budget compared to our 2019 budget. It is coming in at $13.5 million. It is $800,000 below our $14.3 million budget from last year. The primary driver there is outside services at wholesale, and that's related to our ACES contract.
I'm gonna ask a question. On that last slide, how many people are included in that G&A expense for next year compared to 2019? Do you know how many employees, what the
I don't
difference
know the
is?
employees.
Yeah.
You talking about total head count?
Yeah, just in the general
Oh,
administrative.
just the G&A employees.
Yeah.
I have 55, I have to go for the rest of them, that goes up.
Yeah.
I was just
Broken
curious.
them down that way, yeah.
Yeah. So this slide shows, is a pie chart of our G&A expenses that we're proposing for 2020. Again, it's down 5.6%, and salaries and benefits being the primary driver there of $8 million, followed by our insurance of $1.4 million, and outside services of $1.3 million.
The outside services are down because of what?
It's down in the wholesale unit, and it's primarily because of our ACES contract.
Rolling the aces over into KYMU.
Not other outside consulting, just primarily just that.
Yeah, some of the other ones went up, but that's the big driver for the total to go down.
Thank you.
Is there a list of outside services?
Yeah, it's legal, some consulting.
Really, the whole plant.
Yeah, mostly it's legal relative to market and banking and all that. That's the biggest chunk that's not ACES.
So what was the insurance?
Oh, outside services?
No, the insurance.
Oh, the insurance?
Being up
It's-
18%.
It's property and,
Based on property.
Yeah, we had an increase in our,
Was a rate increase?
no, we had an increase, we were able to negotiate with FM Global to maintain the insurance effectively at Elmer Smith as we were transitioning out. No one else wanted to bid on it, so I think the dollar amount, they went up about $89,000, $80,000.
Do you have insurance on unit one?
We have liability insurance, and we
So
don't.
would you drop that?
Yeah, they didn't want to, no. We were happy that they were continuing to insure us, because with our maintenance spend on both units declining, they're concerned about,
Yeah, but that goes away in 2020.
yeah, 2020 will go away.
So will your liability insurance go down instead of being up 18% in property?
No, the issue with the boiler machinery insurance is, as we have, one of the things they do is look at all the potential losses while we're still operating. And we've ramped down maintenance on the plant in general. We haven't had a turbine outage on unit 2 in quite some time, and, we were, I think, happy that they stayed with us at this, even with this increase, as opposed to dropping us and us having to go try and find something at some really exorbitant rate.
So we're insurance less property, and then we're happy with 18% increase?
I'm not happy with it, but I'm happy with it. We were able to work out a deal with them, because we were looking at some very serious scrambling to find somebody that would take it over, because they're very concerned about insuring a plant that's heading to retirement.
I think 2018 was a really bad year for catastrophes, and the insurance in general is going up, across.
Yeah, and it's not just us, but it's they looked at all their insureds and their costs.
All right, the next slide, I've discussed this one already. So the next slide shows our employment costs. Again, it's total company. And it shows our labor as well as our benefits as well. We're proposing a budget of $32.4 million compared to $31.5 million budget, an increase of 3.1%. That is our total headcount difference there, but I will get you some numbers on just the G&A folks. But our total cost again is $32.4 million that we're budgeting.
Big hit the pension is.
I'm sorry.
Said you can see what a big hit the pension increase is.
Correct. Correct. The next slide is a pie chart of those same costs just for 2020. Again, shows it's up 3.1%, and our total labor being just under 21 million. Our benefits cost of almost 11.5 million for the total of 32.4 million. That's all I have. If anyone else has any questions on this portion.
I'm just curious, in the city dividend, the 2.5% increase, that was just a negotiated number, it wasn't based on any factors, correct?
It used to be 5%.
Was there revision every so often that gets reviewed again?
Every 2 years we're supposed to.
Every 2 years?
Every even year, in January.
Is that it? Okay, I was going back to that. Okay, the departments will come forth now and present their section of the capital budget. We have Joe James here for delivery. Thank you. Joe James is here for delivery. We have David Borman here for G&A. Chris Pointer is here for telecom, and Russ Evans is here for production.
Okay, so I'm going to present the fiscal year 2020 proposed capital budget for electric and water delivery. We'll look at the electric side first. For 2020, we have a total projects budget of just over $3.3 million, routine of just under $4 million, reimbursements shy of $300,000 for a total of $6.9 million. And that figure does include the KU agreement at $1.8 million, which would put us in line with our past year budgets for just looking at fiscal 2020 of 5.1. Included in this budget are some figures that we anticipate may be required to support some load growth that we suspect is coming. That includes Bluegrass Commons continuing to expand for $100,000. The shops right here in front of us at Frederica and Tamarack, another $75,000. And then Gateway Commons, as it continues to expand, we anticipate roughly $150,000 worth of potential expenses associated with that. Some of our specific capital projects that we've included in the budget, on the far left is a reconductor down Walnut between Griffith and 9th Street. That's kind of been something we've had planned for a number of years, and we're going to get around to doing that in fiscal 20. On the far right, you'll see a tie between Gateway Commons and Heartland Commons. In red is the route there. We have a transmission route going through there, and we're going to add some underbuild to tie in some distribution circuits to provide additional flexibility in that area. The two in the middle require a little bit of extra explaining. When we were first putting together the proposed fiscal budget, we had the one on the left listed, and that's an additional feeder out of sub L to feed Bluegrass Commons to provide some extra load support there. Originally, it was in the fiscal 2020 budget. I believe it's listed in all the documentation that you guys have probably been provided. But the one to the right there, overhead facilities, taking them underground along 3rd Street from St. Elizabeth to St. Elm. We had planned to finish that in this fiscal year, but as we got into the engineering of that, there were some additional concerns that were brought up, some cost increases that we were not necessarily anticipating, some related to reworking the street lights and just in general underground conflicts that we ran into. So in order to go ahead and complete one of those projects, we reevaluated the feeder out of sub L, and it's no longer going along that path shown on the left in yellow. Instead, we're crossing the street right out from the sub and running up north overhead with some spacer cable. That's gonna save some cost on that project. We can absorb that into this year's budget. And then the amount that we had originally budgeted in fiscal '20 for that feeder, we'll be able to support the underground between St. Elizabeth and St. Elm on 3rd Street.
The Gateway Commons is the dividing line of our service areas is a road in the middle.
80. It's got an
Yeah.
extension there.
So the new school will be on Kenergy,
That's correct.
and then we'll lose Highland in the future if it goes over there.
Highland's not on this now. The road starts, cuts.
So the Highland's on Kenergy now?
Yeah, when you have to get to the top of the hill where a transmission line crosses into the Gateway Commons, and then that's where the road cuts in.
We also have included a couple of pilot-related projects in the fiscal '20 budget. One on the left, undergrounding electric services in the alley between St. Anne and Allen Street. That one is somewhat contingent on Jago continuing on with their project on that lot behind Mellow Mushroom, the old American Legion lot. If they end up doing something there, then we will be proceeding with this project. And then on the right side, we've already started to change out some of the lights along Frederica to decorative lights. We'll be continuing that initiative, stretching from 2nd Street to around Parrish Avenue.
That Allen, St. Anne Allen Alley there, is that part of the TIF project? Will that be, could that be reimbursed any way through that, or is that,
I'm not,
If it's in the TIF area, we have rights to be placed on that, but.
on the list, yeah, but we're pretty far down the list.
We're pretty far down.
We're not counting on the reimbursement. I don't think they've announced anything to this point.
It was hot for a little while, and it's kind of back up.
Let me ask a question. Where we put some new metal poles downtown, right, where that's encroaching on the city sidewalk, what are we doing about that? Who's responsible for that?
Anytime we damage sidewalk, we have to repair it.
Yeah, but I mean, now it's actually up on the sidewalk. So what are they gonna do about that? Are they gonna try to move that sidewalk over, and they're just gonna reduce the width?
Just reduce the width of it.
Yeah, okay.
We'll also be continuing on with our 4 kV to 15 kV conversion efforts. In fiscal 2020, we'll be looking mostly at the sub A area that's highlighted in yellow there. We're kind of finishing up sub B and sub J through this fiscal year. That might bleed over a little bit into 20 before we get to A, but we'll be focusing mostly on A. Some of those circuits won't be able to get converted as they feed MPD, but the other ones out of the sub A area will be the focus of next year's conversion efforts. On the substations, we're planning to replace 2 138 kV breakers associated with that relay work, with relay work associated with the KU interconnect. The breakers themselves have been purchased in the fiscal 19 budget. The $145,000 there is for labor, installation, and relay associated expenses. Beyond our specific projects, we still have routine projects to support. These figures are pretty much in line with figures of year past with a small escalation, but that's fairly typical. We also have distribution pole replacements. We're continuing to identify a number of poles, some of that in effort that's joined with the telecom fiber to home work. We're inspecting the area that's being expanded into next year, potentially right now. We also have some transmission pole replacements budgeted. There's been a proposed project along Industrial Road from Highway 60 to Bernardo for ORA. And if that widens, then we'll have about 8 poles on the US 60 side that will have to be replaced. And then we'll be evaluating what's required on the other end as well. And then, of course, we have vehicles, large and small bucket. There's a couple others, I think a sub truck and a pickup truck included in that figure, and then that KU interconnect.
On the transmission poles, once it's getting replaced with metal poles, I know each pole replacement is somewhat different. Kind of tag a wood pole, you probably get away with it. If you dent one of those poles, you lost structural integrity. It's the cost of replacing one of those.
Total cost would be in the neighborhood of $15,000 to $20,000. The whole difference cost.
I'm not worried about the say it's more susceptible
That's
to
correct.
car impact than the wood poles.
And anytime there is an accident, of course, we go back on insurance if at all possible.
I was curious. I don't want to get, the number of reasons. I get one of the others.
Okay, so now we'll transition to looking at the water capital budget. There are 7 specific projects planned. Those projects account for about $500,000. We also have routine, making up $1.8 million, just shy of $200,000 in reimbursements for a total of around $2.1 million. Those 7 projects are kind of shown here. You got 2 actually represented on the left-hand side, Hickman Avenue and then Emerson Court. So 2 of them are shown on that one. And then in the middle, we've got Parkview Drive, and on the right, West 12th. All of those are small galvanized 2-inch pipe that will be upsizing to 6-inch.
How much galvanized main do we have left?
We have a fair amount left. I mean, we have a number of years to go before we can get it all out. I'd say maybe 10 years or so. Here's the other remaining projects in the Washington Avenue area around Old Hickory. We're going to be replacing a lot of that small galvanized main. That was identified when we did some scatter plotting of our leaks in the area, and we identified that as an area that needs some attention. And on the right-hand side, we're also going to be doing some work on both East and West Highland Court, and that's closer to the Plant A, which should also beef up the area in that vicinity. For the
Got to ask a question here. Knowing that something's going to happen on Breckenridge, is there anything in for work on Breckenridge, or you thought about that?
well, RWRA is kind of
You're
leading.
going to make them pay the whole thing, right?
For the most part. They're leading the charge on it. We're still waiting to get the full scope of details there, but they've already done some inquiries, and we'll be following up with them to make sure that it doesn't impact us.
And how adequate is the infrastructure, new infrastructure we put downtown going to be for the new hotel and some of those things?
We're still trying to receive some data on that. Fire department did some flow tests the other day, and we're starting the meeting process with them. We don't know what all the figures are at this point.
You have a design for the hotel, so there's not really anything.
What's listed here are the routine projects. Of course, the biggest hitter is the top one there, service and meter replacement without new customer, leak repairs and that type of thing. Another couple that I'd point out are the valve replacements. We have $200,000 for that. We're looking at a potential valve replacement program that would support. And then, of course, the vehicles, there's a crew truck that we budgeted for as well. So if we pull it all together, the entire delivery capital budget, you have $6.9 million for electric, 2.1 for water, and then a total of 9.1, of which 1.8 is the KU agreement. That concludes delivery's presentation.
So in the 2020 budget, general administrative, we've requested budgeted $246,000 in our capital budget. Try to break that down just into different categories for simplicity. So for efficiency and reliability enhancements, we budgeted $104,000. That includes network administration software, a data archival solution, network switch replacements, and a SAN upgrade. For security enhancements, we've budgeted $82,000, which includes security glass for the CSC lobby, network security appliance, and then disaster recovery software. Also, for ADA enhancements, we budgeted $21,000, which will allow us to put an auto door opener on the front entrance, the customer entrance to the CSC lobby. And then finally, under routine maintenance, we budgeted $39,000, which includes dollars for industrial shelving and boardroom audio-video upgrades.
Is there big complaints about that door just being proactive?
It's heavy. And we have customers that have issues getting in and out. Since we're doing a redesign down of the entire lobby, that was a good time to do the doors.
Y'all feel like the enhanced glass and all that isolation is necessary?
Yes, it did. It would have been done this
You had
year. We're a
threats
little behind.
already?
I wouldn't call we've had any threats that, we've had disgruntled customers. Yes.
Didn't conceal weapon dangerous.
All right.
Everybody can be back in there.
And it's standard in a lot of the customer service areas you see now that they're going to some type of barrier. Good.
That's all I have. Thank you all.
Well, by far, the largest portion of the capital budget for telecom is going to be the construction of a new segment of our fiber to home build out right there in the center of the city for another 3,800 customers. And I think, JT, this might get you where you want to be, I think. New installations, extensions, conduit, and equipment for commercial. A good portion of that is actually, about 60 grand or so is allocated for conduit for all these new commercial developments that are going around town. We're gonna make sure that we have conduit in there so that we can serve them in the future without having to go back and dig things up. Some network upgrades as far as switch replacements. We are starting to position ourselves, as you probably recall, in our connections to the outside world. We have a 10 gig connection and a 1 gig connection. And in the very near future, we'll probably want to upgrade that 1 gig connection to mirror the other 10 gig connection. So we're starting to do some network upgrades to be prepared for that. It won't happen this fiscal year. Potentially next fiscal year, we're going to continue to monitor our growth and the bandwidth consumption. Fiber to the home, the build out and then customer installations. I'm looking at the budgeted projected installations for next year. And that gives you a total of 4.1 in overall capital for
So
telecom.
your 3.6 million, how much do you plan on spending that and being completed in the same fiscal year?
All of it.
All of it?
Yep, that is our goal. What we're trying to do with the build-out is chunk it up each fiscal year. Matter of fact, the segment that we'd hope to have rolled out this fiscal year we should start to be deploying it, but the construction should be completed by maybe a week or two. I think there's a feeder fiber we just finished yesterday, and we should have it all wrapped up by the end of this fiscal year. So that's kind of our goal, is every fiscal year, take another segment out.
You got 3.6 million for that block.
A portion of it is going to be using some money that we had left over from the bonds, and then there's the, what's the name of that provision? There's a.
Reserves.
Well, we're going to go to reserves, but what was the name of the document that they had?
Resolution.
A resolution, yeah, there was going to be, in the future, you'll see a resolution that will cover the differences in that.
You all will have to approve when we get ready to do it, moving those funds out.
Out of reserves? Yeah.
Any questions?
We need more expenses with this Kentucky Wire project that's going around the state?
No, we should be, well, we're finishing up some lateral connections that we owe to them, but that is it for us. We're done with them. We've completed the network build. They have paid the majority of what they owe us. I think there's still, I don't know, has Austin checked in with you at all?
Yeah, I think we have to wait till the lateral, we need some testing before we get to the next phase.
So there's probably another month or two of us finishing all of that up and then turn it over to them. I did see that the legislature did not allocate additional funds for this year for Kentucky Wired overall. There was a bill in there to terminate the project that didn't make it out of committee. They did receive funding last year, so the question is, how long will that funding,
Yeah, that's where my
carry?
concern was. They were really behind it.
And the executive director has left the organization and is now working for a private company too, so we'll have to see how that all.
The big thing is we got paid.
Yes.
That's what I'm glad to hear. Thank you.
Russ? There you go.
I'll give an update on the production electrical water budget, capital budget. We have a 21 capital and capitalized maintenance project budget for fiscal 2020. Total cost of just over $37 million. Bulk of that is obviously in the water production and the cabin expansion project. We just got about $33,000 for power production. We had 12 carryover projects, the bulk of which is the cabin project, totaling just over $36 million, and we got 9 new projects, just over $1.2 million. Of course, wastewater, the Can Water Treatment Modernization Project, that's our carryover, that piece of it. Just a couple of pictures showing some of the progress. And then on the capital projects continued, the Plan A failure mitigation and contingency money, that is, if we have a failure, Plan A has to get our temporary filters and everything going so we keep producing water, supplying water to Davis County. If that doesn't get utilized, it also becomes contingency for the cabin expansion project. We have wells and wellfield development projects of $688,000, and then a boom truck for the well maintenance of $150,000, and other routine replacements for $47,000. We have 5 capitalized maintenance projects for $235,000. That's what we're not planning on paying the Frederick tank based on our last